My grandmother, Ellen Pierce, was the toughest woman I've ever known. She worked as a nurse in a small coastal hospital in Maine for more than 30 years, through winter storms, power outages, and every kind of human suffering you could imagine. She was practical to the bone, never one for ghost stories or superstition, but there was one thing she never could explain away. It was a dream. She said it first came to her when she was a child growing up in Rockland during the tail end of the Great Depression. In it, she would find herself walking down a long, dim hallway, the kind with yellowed wallpaper and flickering lights, where every step echoed like she was walking through an old building that had been empty for years. She always said the same thing happened. She'd reach the end, turn left, and there'd be a door. She'd push it open, and that's where it always ended. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, never seeing what was beyond it. She had the dream her whole life. It would fade for a few months, then come back without warning. When she was working nights at the hospital, she used to joke that the dreams were just her brain replaying the hallways of the ICU. But even then, she said it always felt different, like a warning. When I was a kid, she'd tell me about it over coffee in her little kitchen, the old clock ticking above the stove and the smell of salt drifting in from the harbor. I used to ask her if she ever figured out what was behind that door. She'd just shake her head and say, "Maybe it's best I never do." She married my grandfather, Tom, in 1954. He was a mechanic, quiet but steady, the kind of man who could fix anything. They raised 2 kids, my father and my aunt, in a white clapboard house that overlooked the bay. By all accounts, they were happy, though life was never easy. Then came the summer of 1976. My dad was 15, my aunt 12. Money was tight, but they decided to take a family road trip down the coast, Maine to the Carolinas. They planned to see lighthouses, beaches, little seaside towns, a proper vacation for once. They made it as far as southern Massachusetts before deciding to stop for the night. It was August, tourist season, and every hotel near the beach was booked. They finally found a small inn off the highway, the Bayview Lodge. 2 stories, faded blue paint, and a flickering neon sign that buzzed in the humid air. They couldn't get adjoining rooms, so my grandmother and aunt stayed in one at the far end of the hall, and my dad and grandfather in another, closer to the elevator. They were tired from the drive. My dad said they ate sandwiches from a vending machine and fell asleep watching an old sitcom rerun. The room smelled faintly of salt and cleaning powder. My grandfather snored softly, the kind of steady rhythm that fills a quiet room. Sometime after 3 a.m., my dad woke up. He never knew why. He said it wasn't a sound, more like a feeling that something had gone still in the air. The room was dark except for a faint orange glow leaking through the curtains. He called out, "Dad?" No answer. He switched on the lamp. The light flickered once before staying on. My grandfather was lying on his back, hands resting on his chest, eyes closed, peaceful, too peaceful. My dad got up, his bare feet cold on the linoleum floor, and shook his father's shoulder. Nothing. He shook him harder. Still nothing. The skin under his fingertips was cool. He ran. He tore down that hallway in his pajamas, heart pounding, calling for his mother. My grandmother opened her door, bleary-eyed, my aunt stirring behind her. "What's wrong?" "It's Dad," my father gasped. "He won't wake up." She didn't even grab a robe. She followed him barefoot, the hallway stretching ahead under the hum of fluorescent lights. She told me later it felt exactly like her dream, the same echo of footsteps, the same cold air, the same heaviness in her chest. When they reached the end of the hall, she turned left. She pushed open the door, and there he was, my grandfather, motionless in bed, the yellow light casting long shadows across the walls. She rushed to him, her training taking over. She checked for a pulse, for breath, for any sign of life. There was nothing. He'd suffered a massive heart attack sometime during the night. My aunt cried. My dad stood frozen. My grandmother just sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she held his. The paramedics came quickly, but it was too late. The vacation ended there. They buried my grandfather back home in Rockland a few days later. My grandmother went back to work not long after. the kind of woman who couldn't sit still. But something changed in her after that night. She told me years later when I was 16, sitting with her on her porch while the tide came in. "I never had that dream again," she said quietly, "not once." At first she didn't see the connection, but then it hit her. The hallway, the turn to the left, the door. Exactly like the one in the hotel. And behind it, the terrible thing she'd spent her whole life unknowingly walking toward. She said she didn't believe in fate or omens or any of that. "I'm a nurse," she told me. "I deal in facts, but that dream," she trailed off, staring at the horizon. "That one makes me wonder." For the rest of her life, she kept her routine. Early mornings, long walks by the water, coffee at the kitchen table. She lived another 40 years, strong as ever, helping neighbors, volunteering at the local clinic, always with that quiet steadiness about her. When she passed away at 88, peacefully in her sleep, I helped clean out her house. In the top drawer of her nightstand, I found a small notebook. Inside were notes from years of her life, work schedules, recipes, reminders. On one page, written in faded ink, were just 5 words. The door was the end. Sometimes when I stay in hotels, I still think about her dream, the hallway stretching on, the light flickering at the end. I try not to imagine what waits behind that door. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just our minds trying to warn us of the inevitable. Or maybe somehow she had spent her whole life walking toward that moment, and the dream was the only way her heart could prepare. Either way, I still feel a chill whenever I walk down a long hallway that turns left at the end. I was 12 the year my parents went away for a weekend trip. They were headed inland for a family funeral. My dad's uncle, someone I'd only met once when I was little. They left early on a Friday morning, promising to be back by Sunday night. That meant 2 whole days alone with my brother Ethan. He was 16, technically the responsible one, but in reality he was just as excited about the freedom as I was. No bedtime, no chores, no one asking if we'd done our homework. Just 2 brothers, the ocean wind outside and our dog Finn snoring on the couch. We lived in a small coastal town called Breakers Bay, about 20 minutes from the nearest city. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and people left their bikes in the front yard without worrying about them. The streets were narrow and lined with old palm trees that creaked in the wind. You could smell salt in the air all the time. That Friday started like any other: school, video games, junk food. We ordered pizza for dinner and watched old superhero movies until the sky outside turned gray. Then the rain started. Breakers Bay didn't get much heavy rain, but that night it came in steady sheets, tapping against the windows and pooling in the street outside. The house felt smaller when it rained, like the sound pressed in from every direction. Ethan sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels, while I sat on the floor eating cold pizza. Finn lay by the sliding glass door, his nose pressed against the glass, watching the storm. He was a big black Labrador mix, strong, quiet, loyal. He'd been with us since I was 5, and I'd never seen him scared of anything. Around 9 o'clock, when the rain had slowed to a drizzle, I heard it. Someone calling my name outside. "Leo." It sounded faint, like it came from the street. I froze, glancing at Ethan. He muted the TV. Then we heard it again. "Hey, Leo, you home?" I went to the window by the living room. 3 figures stood near our front fence, half lit by the flickering street lamp. I recognized 2 of them, guys from school, Tyler and Mason. The third was someone I didn't know. He was taller, older, maybe 20, with long, damp hair that hung over his hoodie. "What do they want?" Ethan whispered. "No idea," I said. "Maybe they're just messing around." "Don't go out," he said firmly. But I was 12, and 12-year-olds think they're invincible. So I slipped on my slippers and cracked open the front door. The air outside was cold and damp, smelling like wet sand and seaweed. The boys grinned when they saw me. "Hey man," Tyler called. "We were just walking around. Thought we'd stop by." "What for?" I asked. "Got something to show you," Mason said. He stepped closer, his sneakers splashing in the puddle near the curb. "Come down to the corner. It's cool, I swear." The older guy still hadn't said a word. He leaned against the fence, eyes half hidden under his hood, just watching me. His face was pale under the yellow streetlight, and something about the way he stared made my stomach twist. "It's late," I said. "My parents aren't home." "That's fine," Tyler said quickly. "It's just down the block. We found something washed up on the beach. Looks like a part of a boat or something." His voice sounded rehearsed. Then the older one finally spoke. "You scared?" His voice was flat, a little too calm. He held something in his hand, a brown bottle, maybe beer. "It's just a few minutes, kid." I didn't answer. Something felt wrong. Then I heard movement behind me. Finn had gotten up. I hadn't even noticed him walk over, but suddenly he was beside me, shoulder brushing my leg. His head was low, ears perked, eyes fixed on the older guy. Finn's growl started quiet, like a deep vibration in the floorboards. Then it grew. The man's smirk faded. "Easy, boy," he muttered, taking half a step back. Finn took a step forward, muscles rippling under his wet fur. The two boys looked nervous now. "Come on," Mason said, tugging at the older guy's sleeve. "Forget it." But the man just stared. "You think that dog's gonna stop me?" he said, too soft for anyone else to hear. Finn barked once, a sharp, echoing sound that broke through the rain. The man flinched. That was all it took. The three of them turned and walked off down the street, their footsteps splashing in the puddles. I stayed frozen until they disappeared around the corner. When I shut the door, Ethan was standing there, pale and wide-eyed. "He tried to open the gate," he said. "I saw him touch it." We locked every door and window, pulled the curtains tight, and left the lights on. Finn stayed by the front door all night, alert but calm. Every time the wind shifted, he'd lift his head, listen, then settle again. I barely slept. Every creak and drip made me jump, but Finn's breathing was steady, slow, grounding. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows. The street was quiet, puddles glimmering under the sky. Everything looked normal, like the night before hadn't happened at all. Dad called to check in. When Ethan told him what happened, there was a long silence on the line. Then Dad said quietly, "Good thing Finn was there." When they got home that evening, Dad grilled a steak just for Finn. He tore into it happily, tail thumping against the floor. Mom gave him a hug and called him our hero. A few weeks later, I found out who the older guy was. I overheard some kids at school talking about a man who'd been arrested for harassing people near the boardwalk. When they said his name, my stomach dropped. It was him, the one in the hoodie. I didn't tell my parents, but that night, when I was supposed to be asleep, I went to the kitchen and sat beside Finn while he dozed on the floor. His fur was warm under my hand. He gave a little sigh and rested his chin on my knee like he always did when I was scared. Years went by and life moved on. Ethan went to college, I got taller, started driving, got my own friends, but Finn was always there. Older, slower, but still with that same quiet watchfulness. When storms came, he'd sit by the window, just like that night, staring out as if he was waiting for something. Sometimes, when thunder rolled in the distance, he'd lift his head, listen, and then look back at me with that same steady calm. He grew gray around the muzzle, his eyes softer, but he never lost that alert spark. The year before I went to college, he passed away peacefully in his sleep, right on the same rug in the kitchen where he used to nap as a puppy. I sat with him for hours that morning. The window cracked open so the sea breeze could drift through. The air smelled like salt and rain, just like that night years ago. After the vet came, I found myself scrolling through old photos. One stood out. Finn lying by the sliding glass door, the sunlight warming his fur, eyes half closed but still alert. The ocean reflected faintly in the glass behind him. That's the Finn I remember, the one who stood between me and something dark without hesitation. He wasn't just a dog, he was my guardian, my friend, my family. And even now, when storms roll in and the house creaks under the wind, sometimes I still feel that same quiet reassurance, that Finn is there somewhere, watching the door, making sure I'm safe. Halloween night was never a big deal for me. I was 20, juggling part-time classes and a delivery job, living alone in a small apartment downtown. My roommate had moved out 2 months earlier, and I hadn't found a replacement yet. Rent was tight, but I liked the quiet. It had only been 2 weeks since my grandfather's funeral. My parents were still staying with my grandmother out in the suburbs, helping her adjust to the empty house. I'd stayed in the city because I couldn't miss work. But in truth, part of me didn't want to be surrounded by the smell of lilies and sympathy cards anymore. Grief is louder when everyone else is quiet. That Tuesday night, October 31st, the city was alive. From my 12th floor window, I could see traffic crawling below, headlights and taillights streaming like blood cells through veins. Music and laughter floated up from the street, bursts of joy that felt disconnected from my own small world. I heated up a frozen pizza, cracked open a soda, and cued a horror movie I'd already seen twice. Outside, the hallway light near my door flickered again. It had been doing that for a week, stuttering every few seconds. The landlord promised to fix it, but I wasn't holding my breath. I kind of liked it. It made the place feel less sterile, like an old film reel looping endlessly. I texted my parents to check in. "Everything okay there?" Mom replied a few minutes later. "Grandma finally slept. You doing okay, hon?" "Yeah, just staying in tonight. Miss you guys." After that silence. Around 11:30 p.m., the movie had reached its second act when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on my door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze mid-bite. Nobody ever came by this late. Deliveries ended hours ago, and I didn't know my neighbors well enough for a surprise visit. I muted the TV and waited, holding my breath. No follow-up knock, no voices, nothing but the hum of my refrigerator and the faint whoosh of wind outside the window. Maybe it was the people down the hall. The building was old. Sound traveled weirdly through the vents and pipes. Still, curiosity got me. I opened the hallway camera feed on the tenant app. Each floor had one aimed at the elevators. The corridor outside my unit was empty. I told myself it was a prank. Kids running around, knocking doors, running off. Typical Halloween nonsense. I went back to the movie. 10 minutes later, another knock, this time heavier, slower, more deliberate. I muted the TV again, heart thudding now. When I opened the camera feed again, someone was there. A tall figure stood a few feet from my door, facing the lens directly. The image was grainy, greenish from the night mode, but the mask was unmistakable. Porcelain white, cracked across the forehead, hollow eyes staring dead ahead. A faint red streak traced the mouth like a crooked smile. The rest of him was swallowed in a black hoodie and gloves. He didn't move. I pressed the intercom button beside the door. "Can I help you?" My voice echoed faintly through the speaker in the hall. The figure tilted his head slightly, slow, almost curious. Then he knocked again, 1, 2, 3. Each hit made the frame of the door vibrate. "If you don't leave, I'm calling security," I said, trying to sound steady. He didn't respond. After several seconds, he turned, walking toward the elevator at an unhurried pace. I kept the camera on him until the doors slid closed. That was enough for me. I locked the deadbolt, slid the chain into place, and checked the windows. Everything was sealed. I even checked the bathroom vent. Completely irrational, but fear makes you thorough. After half an hour, I tried to convince myself it was some prankster heading home. By 1 a.m., my adrenaline had burned off, replaced with exhaustion. I turned the TV off and got ready for bed. I left the lamp on, just in case. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were restless. Shapes at the door, footsteps in the hall, the flickering light outside pulsing like a heartbeat. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pushing through the blinds. My first thought was relief. Quiet, ordinary morning. I reached for my phone to check the time. The screen was already on, showing the camera app. I frowned. I didn't remember leaving it open. Then I saw the new video file, timestamp 3:47 a.m. My thumb hovered over it for a moment, then I hit play. The video was shaky, dimly lit, like it had been recorded by hand. It showed my bedroom from the foot of the bed, me asleep, one arm out from under the blanket. The camera drifted closer, slow and steady. The screen's light flickered against my face. Then it turned. The white mask filled the frame, closer now, detailed enough that I could see fine cracks running through the surface. The red smear on the mouth wasn't paint. It looked like something darker, sticky. In his other hand, the man held a knife. My knife. The chef's knife from the kitchen block, the one with the chipped handle. He pointed it at me, still sleeping peacefully behind him. The video ended abruptly. I stared at the screen until my hands started to shake. The door chain was still in place, locks untouched, windows sealed, no sign of entry. But someone had been in my room. I called building security first, then the police. 2 officers showed up around 10 a.m. One middle-aged, one young, both polite but skeptical. They watched the video twice. The older one scratched his jaw. "Could be a prank," he said. "Halloween night, kids mess around." "Kids don't record themselves standing over people with kitchen knives," I snapped. They dusted for prints in the kitchen and bedroom. Nothing. The mask hid everything. Gloves prevented any real trace. Security checked the hallway feed, but apparently, the camera on my floor had glitched out between 3:30 and 4 a.m. The technician said it lost power, even though the rest of the floor's electricity worked fine. No other residents reported anything strange. One of the officers gave me a card. "Change your locks, maybe stay with family for a few days. We'll file a report." They left, and suddenly the apartment felt smaller, like the walls had shifted closer overnight. I called my mom, voice trembling, and told her everything. She didn't hesitate. "Pack a bag," she said. "You're coming home, right now." I spent the night in my grandmother's guest room, couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old house sounded like a knock. I broke my lease, moved across town, got a cheaper place, smaller with no security cameras, just old-fashioned locks and bolts. Still, every Halloween since, at some random hour of the night, my phone buzzes. The same notification from the old tenant app I never managed to uninstall. Motion detected at your door. No matter how many times I delete it, the alert always finds its way back.